ChatGPT has taken the world by storm. It's like having a super intelligent assistant who never tires and has access to a staggering amount of information on just about anything. It can answer questions, it can troubleshoot problems, it can even write code. People are saying it's going to take our jobs, but is it really? I'm going to put ChatGPT to the test, see if it's really the game changer people say it is. Is this the future of the IT profession? Will it fundamentally change the way we work? Will it replace us altogether? Whew, here comes the future. Welcome back to the Pro Tech Show. This is ChatGPT. It's an AI-powered chatbot, but it's a major step up from the fairly useless ones you'll find on most websites. If you haven't had a play with ChatGPT, you should give it a go while it's still free, because it's seriously impressive and it won't be free forever. When you have Microsoft reportedly planning to shell out $10 billion for a minority share in the company, you know they're going to monetize it. There are lots of interesting and often amusing examples of ChatGPT being used on the internet, but I'm going to focus on the use case of an IT professional. I'll even give you a chance to pitch your own wits against the AI later on. I'll start with a fairly soft one, but sometimes it's the softer aspects that IT pros can actually struggle with. ChatGPT, can you write a business case for upgrading our firewall? There you go. I love how it's just assumed the firewall is old and out of support. I didn't tell it that, it's just made an assumption and gone with it as an example. To be fair, network equipment is often the last thing to get upgraded, and there are a lot of end-of-life firewalls out there, so this is a pretty likely justification it's picked. This is actually pretty good. It's not going to convince your board to spend money as is, but it's given us the bones of a structure here, along with things to consider. And it has avoided the trap many IT pros fall into of using overly technical language that will confuse the business folk you're trying to get sign-off from. This is good. It's even estimated a timeline for us, but we need prices. We've got some generic waffle here, because as ChatGPT has rightly pointed out, I haven't given it very much information to work with. It wants to know about the size and complexity of the network, the number of users, the type of firewall. Okay, ChatGPT, I want 2 Cisco ASAs to service 5 subnets and 250 people. And hey, there we go, some actual recommendations and a very wide-ranging budget. Ironically, in our business case to replace end-of-life firewalls, ChatGPT has recommended end-of-life firewalls. But ChatGPT was trained on data from a year or more back, so it won't be up to date. These would still have been a bad recommendation by the time its training finished too, but any way you look at it, it was unreasonable to expect an up-to-date recommendation from out-of-date information. Let's move on and ask it a more technical question. ChatGPT, how do I renew the SSL certificate on a remote desktop server? Okay, this is just generic boilerplate information and has nothing to do with remote desktop services. Let's give it more information. It's an RD gateway on Windows Server 2019. Okay, not what I expected. I thought it would tell me to use Server Manager or give me a PowerShell script, but it has directed me to the old MMC snap-in. Old doesn't mean wrong though, let's check it out. Open the RD Gateway Manager, right-click the server, Properties, SSL Certificates tab. Okay, so far so good, but now it tells me to click Create a New Certificate. Yeah, that button doesn't exist. ChatGPT made it up. It's not this one under the self-signed certificate option, because ChatGPT is trying to get us to generate a CSR to submit to a certificate authority, not generate a self-signed one. It's right about that at least. A self-signed one would trigger security errors on the client, so we wouldn't want that. This is one of ChatGPT's major problems though. Some of the information it provides is wrong, because it has no idea what it's actually saying. It's just regurgitating information it saw on the internet during its training, and trying to put it together in a way that seems statistically feasible. Artificial intelligence isn't true intelligence. ChatGPT cannot think or reason in the way a human can. As impressive as its communication is, it's no closer to sentience than Google. And the way ChatGPT presents false information with such apparent confidence could be dangerous. In fact, after experiencing this behaviour, the Register went on to dub ChatGPT Dunning-Kruger as a service, because of the way it appears to regularly overestimate itself. Of course, it isn't really overestimating anything, it's just giving you a statistically likely guess based on the data it has. There is no agenda behind it. We will come back to this, believe me. Back to your certificate instructions though. Despite the misstep, this is a pretty useful response. The rest of the instructions are fine apart from the CSR generation, but the problem people have with certificates isn't typically how to generate them, it's the fact that every single application seems to have a completely different process to install and use them. Especially if they're made by Microsoft. Like, would it just kill you to standardize in a method and use it more than once? If you already have the certificate, these instructions will tell you how to install and use it on a remote desktop gateway server running Windows Server 2019. Probably not the way I do it, but it'll work and it'll save some of the time trying to Google the process. I'll give this a B-. Let's turn the heat up a bit. Instead of getting ChatGPT to recite procedures, let's have it troubleshoot a problem for us. How about the blue screen of death? I'm choosing this because there are hundreds if not thousands of possible causes, so ChatGPT can't just recite a stock answer, but I'll give it a fairly straightforward one to troubleshoot. It comes courtesy of Just a Dude, who posted their problem as a comment on my video on how to troubleshoot a blue screen. And we know what their fix was, so let's see if ChatGPT can get there. My computer crashed with a blue screen, can you help me fix it? Is that a vague and unhelpful problem description? Sure. Have you ever known a user to provide anything else though? ChatGPT provides some general advice on things to check. This is all fairly sensible stuff, but it finishes by asking if we're getting a specific error message. Well, Just a Dude was getting a video TDR failure, so let's see what ChatGPT makes of that. Okay, it is zeroed in on the graphics card, and it suggested that it's likely to be a GPU driver or hardware issue. That's good work, ChatGPT. It's suggesting we try updating our graphics driver from our manufacturer, and gives Nvidia, AMD, and Intel as examples. Just a Dude had one more piece of information, the name of the file exhibiting the problem. Let's give that to ChatGPT and see if it narrows the recommendation down further. AMD. Good job, ChatGPT, that's an A-. If Just a Dude had gone to ChatGPT for help in this case, ChatGPT would have successfully troubleshooted their problem, and its number one suggestion was the actual resolution. I'm impressed. Now let's up the ante. Let's give it a server problem to diagnose. In times gone by, I did a lot of Exchange Server consultancy, and that meant I got a lot of Exchange Server problems escalated to me. One of the more common issues was a disk filling up with transaction logs. If someone had put the mail queues on the same volume, which is what you get if you next finish your way through the install, then before that happened you'd often experience a condition called back pressure. This is where the server would stop processing inbound messages in an attempt to prevent itself filling completely. Needless to say, I've seen this problem many times, so let's see how ChatGPT handles it. Can you help me troubleshoot Exchange Server back pressure? Okay, good start. We've got a bit of information about back pressure, and it's asking for more detail about the problem and our infrastructure. Let's keep it simple. One server, we're not receiving emails, and we have event ID 15006, which indicates the disk with our queues on it is too full. ChatGPT has some suggestions. It seems to have missed the significance of the event ID I provided, and Exchange Pro would have gone straight to the disk on that, but that's okay, it's in the list of suggestions. Although I have no idea what it means about the version of Exchange you're running being under pressure. That's not a thing. Exchange servers don't go into back pressure because their software version is too low, and don't give Microsoft ideas. It's given us some PowerShell to run, presumably to confirm we are in fact in back pressure. I say presumably because that isn't actually going to work. The getQ command is real, but back pressure status isn't a real property. ChatGPT is making things up again. Another vote for disk space and a bunch of stuff that isn't going to be much help to us. Let's say we followed this advice. We'd have gone down a few dead ends, but the recommendation to check disk space would pan out. So let's tell ChatGPT that a disk is full, and we'll tell it that our database logs folder is using all the space. When an Exchange server runs out of space, more often than not, it's because the database transaction logs got out of hand. Usually these will collect between backups, and then the old ones will get deleted after a successful backup. Essentially, every scrap of data that has changed since your last good backup is held in these logs. So if you need to restore your database, you can replay the logs to top it up, and then you don't lose anything. It's a good system, but it does mean that if anything goes wrong with your backups, these logs will grow and grow. There are other reasons the transaction logs might fail to truncate correctly, but unless one of your admins is moving a large number of mailboxes, it's almost always a problem with the backups. ChatGPT confirms that yes, a disk filling with transaction logs could cause back pressure, and suggests deleting or moving data. Moving the logs could buy you time, but it requires an outage, and if you don't get to the root cause, you're just going to fill the other disk instead. Same with deleting junk files, it's just putting off the inevitable if you don't get to the bottom of it. Be very careful about deleting transaction logs. As a general rule, don't do it if it can be avoided. At the very least, you're compromising the recoverability of the server, but if you delete the wrong one and it contains uncommitted data, you've just incurred data loss, and potentially even corrupted your database. ChatGPT mentions truncating. Truncating is better. Truncating is when Exchange deletes the logs itself. You won't incur data loss this way because Exchange will only delete files it knows to be safe. But the way ChatGPT tells you to do it? Yikes! ESEutil/D does not truncate your logs. ESEutil/D defragments your database, and you should probably never do that. It's an offline operation and it takes ages, so you'll have a prolonged outage. It requires more space as it defrags your data into a second copy of the database. Our problem was a lack of disk space, so something that consumes a significant amount of disk space is going to be difficult for us. It also hurts performance, just don't do it. ChatGPT is not doing well here. We had a Mailflow issue and no disk space. Now we need even more disk space and we have a full-blown outage in our hands. Next, it's talking about circular logging. Circular logging is a reasonable suggestion here. It changes the behaviour, so that instead of retaining transaction logs between backups, Exchange just keeps a couple and overwrites them continually. It will prevent the disk from filling up, but it does limit recoverability, because now if you restore your database from backup, you lose all of the data since that backup. As a general rule, you want circular logging disabled, but in this case it could get you out of a hole while you work on the root cause of the problem. Unfortunately, although ChatGPT has made the link to circular logging, it has got everything backwards. It says circular logging is enabled by default. It's not. It says disabling it may help. It won't. Enabling it might. It also says that it truncates logs when the database is closed. It truncates them all the time. If it only did it when the database was closed, you'd need to take the server offline regularly to deal with the logs. Next, it makes this strange claim that truncating the logs does not free up space on the disk drive, instead it frees up space within the Exchange database file. That's complete nonsense. Truncating the logs does free up space in the disk. It literally deletes the log files from the disk. It has nothing to do with the database file, but I can see where ChatGPT's wires are crossed. Deleting emails or deleting mailboxes from your database does not make the database file smaller, it creates reusable space within it. One of the ways you could reclaim this space is by defragging your database with ESEutil/D. It's confusing two different problems and two different solutions and mashing bits of them together. Side note, if you have deleted a lot of mailboxes and want to shrink the database file, don't defrag it, create a new database and move the mailboxes, then delete the old one. You can do that live, there's no need to have an outage and defrag it. Okay ChatGPT, we did the defrag. We had a big outage and our database file is now marginally smaller, but the disk with the transaction logs is still full. What next? Right, this is now looking for corrupt log files or corrupt databases, and it even suggests restoring the database from backup. I'm going to stop going down this rabbit hole. We've caused an outage, we've had to add more storage for a defrag, and by the time we've restored a backup, chances are that one of these steps will have broken the transaction log chain, and now we're incurring data loss. This one hasn't gone well, it's an F. Let's switch things up a bit and ask ChatGPT to follow our instructions instead of vice versa. Let's have it build us some servers in the cloud. Give me an ARM template to deploy 2 load-balanced web servers and a SQL database in Azure. That started off pretty well, it's building an actual ARM template here. If you're not familiar with the concept of infrastructure as code, I'll link a video to it in the description, but this is how to do things in Cloudland. I like how it set up an HTTP health probe on the load balancer. I told it I wanted web servers, so it was correctly deduced that we'd want to ensure the web services are actually running correctly. That's good. Unfortunately, it bombs out partway through and we don't get to see if the completed template would actually work. Let's see if we can pick up where it left off. It started again, it's failed again. Okay ChatGPT, what happened? I mean, this is fair. It doesn't have enough information to do a good job, so it's downing tools. If this was a person, I'd expect them to clarify a few requirements before they started building things, so I won't mark ChatGPT down too harshly. Based on this attempt, I can foresee a later iteration of this asking some questions for clarification and building a whole template on command, but we're not quite there yet. It does offer to help me though if I can ask it more specific questions. Okay, can you explain the front-end IP configuration section? That's really good. It may not have built the full template I asked for, but it can tutor me on it. I could absolutely use this to help me build my own templates. I'm giving it a D for the template itself and a B for being helpful and explaining things in context. I want to give it an A, but it seems to think the load balancer must have a public IP address, which isn't true. It could be a private IP. Now, it could be referring to the public IP address that it chose during its ARM template, but I asked it in a fresh chat as well and it said the same thing, so I have to deduct points for inaccuracy. Alright, it seems to have an understanding of infrastructure as code, so let's see how it fares with configuration as code. I've been updating the Linux portion of my home lab, and I decided I'd define a chunk of the configuration using Ansible. I'm going to drop a couple of playbooks into ChatGPT and ask it to explain what's happening. This one is used to join my Linux servers to Active Directory. Let's see what ChatGPT makes of it. This is an Ansible playbook written in YAML. Yes! The playbook is used to provision and configure Linux hosts in an Active Directory domain. That's brilliant! It's giving me a high-level summary of the playbook in plain English and then going into further detail about the different steps involved. Honestly, this is pretty much perfect right here. I feel like I need to give it more of a challenge. The next playbook should be a bit trickier. This one configures the server to be backed up by Veeam. It creates a user account and assigns a public SSH key along with the permissions and packages Veeam needs to run application-aware processing tasks on the server. Then we've got the tricky part. The playbook then connects to a completely different server that's running Windows and executes some PowerShell. This isn't built-in Windows PowerShell either, it's using Veeam's own module. Will ChatGPT be able to interpret a Veeam-specific PowerShell that's wrapped inside an Ansible YAML file? This is like one type of code within another type of code. And I'm also going to replace the play and task names with meaningless numbers to avoid giving ChatGPT any hints. Let's see what it does. Okay, it doesn't start out quite as well this time. There's no natural language summary. It does explain the individual steps sufficiently well, but play 2 is the interesting one where we have the embedded PowerShell. Oh, I am impressed. It uses the Windows PowerShell module to connect to Veeam backup server and check if the virtual machine is a member of the backup job. If it's not, it will add the virtual machine to the job depending on the OS. That's spot on. It's even picked out that it's getting added to a different backup job based on its operating system. That's an A. That's awesome. Right, it understands PowerShell. For our final test, let's ask it to write a script. And this is where you'll get a chance to play along at home. ChatGPT, write a PowerShell script to delete Active Directory user accounts that have not logged in for more than 30 days. This is a pretty cool feature. Not only has it written a script to do what we asked, it has explained what it's doing as well. This isn't just a tool to palm off your work to ChatGPT, this is teaching you as it goes. But it has made a mistake. Let's play a little game. I'm going to put the code on screen for 2 seconds. I'd like you to pause the video and review the code. See if you can spot the mistake and put it in a comment, then resume the video. We'll see who's brave enough to be honest here. Did you get it? It's this last logon timestamp property. Information in Active Directory is replicated between domain controllers. If you updated a user account property every time any account logged on somewhere, and replicated that change to every domain controller every time, it could generate a ton of replication traffic. So what actually happens is the local domain controller updates a last logon property, but it doesn't get replicated. Additionally, there is a last logon timestamp property that does get replicated, but it is only updated if the current value is older than about 14 days. That's the property ChatGPT has chosen, which means this script, rather than deleting any accounts that haven't logged in for 30 days, will actually delete accounts that haven't logged in from anywhere between 16 and 30 days. Now, if the target was a couple of years, who cares about 14 days here or there? But if the target is a month, that's out by nearly a half. ChatGPT has generated a working script, but it's another case of it not understanding the source material it used to build it, and this one would get you in trouble when you deleted the wrong accounts. Now, ChatGPT has a really interesting ability to adjust its output based on feedback. I'll ignore the last logon timestamp property. What I asked it to do was a bit reckless anyway. There was no scope, it was running across the entire domain. There could be all sorts of system and service accounts caught up in that. Let's tell ChatGPT to limit it to an OU called office users, and we'll also ask it to delete the user's Exchange mailbox. Look at this! It has now updated the script and limited the scope to our specific OU. It's also added in some code to delete the user's mailbox as well. That is a very impressive capability, although again it's not perfect. This code will actually error pretty quickly, because the second line import Exchange module is wrong. That's not how you import Exchange commandlets. ChatGPT obviously didn't know how to do it, so it just made it up. The disable mailbox command is correct though. That's a proper Exchange PowerShell commandlet. Here's another challenge for you. Why is this script not very efficient? Setting aside the import module line and the last logon timestamp, it would work, but it's wasting time. 2 seconds to hit pause, then put your answers in the comments. Did you spot it? An Exchange mailbox is tied to the user account. When you delete the user account, the mailbox also gets deleted, so all of the code it's added for Exchange is superfluous. It could have just left things at remove ID user. Not the end of the world, but it's about to screw up. Read the last paragraph. When you remove a user with Exchange mailbox associated, it will be moved to the recoverable items, with a retention period of 30 days. That number is configurable, but it's 30 by default. Here's the problem though. If the mailbox should be deleted without a possibility of recovery, you should use remove mailbox instead of disable mailbox. Oh dear. I've seen the names of these commands trip admins up before. They're named really badly in my opinion. Disable mailbox removes the mailbox. So what does remove mailbox do? It removes the mailbox and the Active Directory user account. Big difference. In either case, you can choose to purge mailboxes before the retention period is elapsed. The on-premises remove mailbox command does have an option to do it in a single step, but you can still purge one deleted by disable mailbox. If you're in the cloud, they both have the same options regardless. The point is, one of these commands leaves a user account in place and the other deletes it. That's the difference. Does it matter in this script? No, we're deleting the user account anyway. But let's see if ChatGPT would follow through in this bad advice. Modify the script to delete the mailbox without the possibility of recovery, but do not delete the user account. Oh boy, it did. That'll go and delete the user accounts I explicitly told it not to. That's bad. That's a... Hey ChatGPT, generate a P45 form. Okay, it didn't get the joke, but you'll probably need one of these if you followed its advice. Right, I'm not going to score this one because it was honestly quite a mixed bag. I'm going to ask you to score it instead. What grade would you give ChatGPT for this PowerShell section? Leave it in the comments. Now let's answer the question at the beginning of this video. Will ChatGPT make IT pros obsolete? In short, no. Without a doubt, it's impressive technology, but it gets things wrong on a regular basis because it simply has no idea what it's actually saying. It's just regurgitating information from the internet, and we all know that you can't take anything on the internet at face value. But it's far from useless. In fact, ChatGPT, or more likely a future iteration on this technology, will probably change the way we work as IT professionals. If you simply plumb ChatGPT's output directly into production, you deserve to be replaced by a chatbot. But consider this. Once upon a time, people had to memorize a ton of information. It was like this for me in school. Grades were based more on how much information you could memorize and less on your ability to actually apply that knowledge. These days, that's stupid because we have the sum of all human knowledge at our fingertips. The skill now isn't so much about remembering the information, but rather the ability to find it, sift it, discern what's useful from what's nonsense, and then apply it in context. ChatGPT is rather lacking on the discernment side, and it doesn't know its own limitations, but it is really good at finding information quickly and then explaining it in a way that's easy for a human to understand. It's an accelerator. Would I trust one of its PowerShell scripts? Absolutely not. We've seen they can cause serious problems. But it gets pretty close. If I came across a new product I wanted to automate, I could ask ChatGPT to write a script. I wouldn't run it, but if it's maybe 70% right, then I only need to understand it and complete it instead of starting entirely from scratch with a set of commands I've never seen before. Plus, ChatGPT can explain it to me. One of my early jobs was to reverse engineer a customer's automation server. A previous member of staff had built it and left, and they had no idea how it worked. All they knew was that it was full of scripts, and if they turned it off, half of the business came to a halt. It was old and they needed to upgrade it, so I had to figure out everything it was doing and re-implement it on a newer platform. Imagine if I had ChatGPT available to me then. I could have just dumped all of those scripts into it and had it explain them to me. Heck, the customer might not have even needed my help. Will this technology replace IT pros? No, but it should make us better. As will this video. Probably. After a video about AI, I decided I ought to let an AI choose one for you. Let me know if it shows well.